Thanks for joining me, Marcus.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, Rob. Excited
so
to be
cool
here.
to
Yeah.
meet you in person. I've been spending a good amount of time getting to know you without actually physically seeing
getting
and
to know the
meeting
pool
you.
guy, huh?
Well, you're much more than the pool guy. And, the Do Nothing podcast is all about extraordinary leaders. And I always like to start off by asking the guest about how they start off their day. I start off my day by doing nothing, which is a meditation practice when I wake up. But I'm curious what you do. What's your routine that kind of gets you set up for the day and gets you clear and ready to go?
And I feel like, because, I listen to a lot of stuff, right? I feel like this is an area that I'm in process. I'm working on it, and I'm adjusting as I go. Let me give you an example. I have been one of those that has made the mistake of quickly looking at their phone, like many. And so now there's a rule in my house, which is a really great rule, which is before I look at any electronics, I have to lean over to my wife and I have to have a conversation with her first. She even wants me to wake her up. Like literally, she's like, I want you to wake me up, and then I want us to focus on each other, and then you can do whatever you need to do, which is pretty cool. And this is what I love about her, because she recognizes, she keeps me from going down the rabbit hole of my professional life, right? Mm-hmm. She's always there to make sure that I'm in check, and so that's number one. That's number one.
It's Nikki,
Nikki,
right?
yeah, Nikki is my wife.
Like your rock?
Yeah, well, I literally, true story. So we were in different elementary schools, right? So up until 5th grade, we were in different schools, same county. 6th grade, we come together in one school. First day of school, I see a photo of the class that we had merged with. And there's this tall, lanky girl in the back, and I'm like, I like that girl right there. And that was Nikki. And we became boyfriend and girlfriend for a day. Mm-hmm. She breaks up with me literally in 24 hours because I guess she realized not my guy. And it wasn't until we were senior in high schools that we got back together. But we were best friends pretty much throughout middle and high school, and we got married pretty young as well. Mm-hmm. But yeah, she's been my rock. But
how old were you and got married?
I was probably 22, I guess. Yeah, I was 22 years old.
We have that in common.
Yeah, it was, and I'll say it, happily say it, easily one of the best decisions of my life. Mm-hmm. I haven't followed the same path that many people follow. Not that there's a right or a wrong path. I don't believe there's a right or a wrong path. I had my first kid in college intentionally, and having a child in college is such an amazing experience. It was so cool. And so I learned early on how to integrate family with work. Because at the time, college was work, right? And I had a full-time job. I had, been married not too long, and we had our first child, and I'm going to school, taking, normal, block of hours. It was amazing time of my life, and it really galvanized my wife and I together early on. I would do it all over again.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I want to come back to that in a second, but you said step one is you look at Nikki, you wake up, you guys connect.
Yeah. So I'm the type of guy that immediately I want to feel the part. So I go to the bathroom immediately, I shower, I shave, I do the whole nine. I'm the type of guy that, I use showers to just change my state. Mm-hmm. So it's not unusual for me to take a couple, 2 or 3 during a day, just when I want to, and they're always fast. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm like the 90-second Navy shower guy, right? And so they're fast, but that's what I do. And then usually I like to use my morning time to get rid of the creative projects, right, that I have. I do still get sucked into emails, that's the big area where I'm trying to improve, because I recognize that we have a certain amount of energy, right, and focus, and we have peak performances throughout the day, and mine is certainly one of those times is in the morning. And unfortunately, I still waste some of it on email. So that's one of those works in progress right now. But that's ideal for me. And then usually, once everybody else gets up, I'll have breakfast with the family. This is if I'm home, because I travel about 125 days a year, roughly. 125, 150 days a year. But when I'm home, I want to have breakfast as a family together. And I usually make breakfast. And so I usually make pancakes for my kids. I have 4 kids. Every day that I'm home. It's just the standard way that we do it while my wife is maybe getting ready or whatever.
What time do you wake up?
I generally wake up right around 6:30 or 7.
6:30, okay.
Yeah.
How much sleep do you need?
Without prompting. I would say that I'm around a 7-hour guy is ideal for me. If I have too many that are in the 6s, it'll catch up. I mean, I've gone through stretches in my life, right, where it was 5 to 6 hours. For like a year straight or whatever. And I don't think that's necessarily sustainable for a lot of people, but I did do it for a period of time.
Do you still do the elliptical?
I do, yes. I either do elliptical or treadmill every single day. It's very, very religious for me. And once again, I do that as a state change. It's like I find that I derive a tremendous amount of energy from exercise. If I don't exercise in a day, I feel it. I feel it a lot. I'm the type of guy that if I have a choice, I never take the stairs. I mean the elevator or the escalator. I want to walk up the steps, just because I feel like I get energy from exercise, and I'd rather always exercise than take a nap. And so if I have this like feeling like I need to take a nap, I usually just say I'm gonna go exercise now. And then it overcomes that nap. But it's every day, and I never really miss it. It's very rare.
Do you exercise at the same time every day?
No, I don't.
Interesting. Because
this is what I found. When you travel, you can't do that. Because how it works is, right, you might have you arrive super late, or you have a very early morning sound check, or any of these, like, there's all these things that can throw off. And so I immediately in the morning will say, what time do I know I'm going to have today in order to be able to exercise? And I knock it out as soon as I know that I'm going to have the time. And this way, it doesn't, especially, you know how it is. If let's say you're at an event and all of a sudden somebody invites you to dinner and that dinner goes until late, and all of a sudden you're getting back at midnight or just some silly thing like that, and I'm like, gee, now I've killed the night and I can't exercise. So I say, what is the time that I know that I can do it? And that's when I get it done. I think if I was a homebody, like in other words, if I worked a normal job where I didn't travel, I would probably have a set time. But you know what's the reality is a lot of people that travel have a very unhealthy lifestyle, right? And they don't eat well, they gain a lot of weight, and it leads to lethargy, lower performance. And I've tried to eliminate that. So I've stayed within roughly 5 pounds probably for the last, 20 years.
You live in the town or close by to the town that you grew up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. 2 stoplights in my county.
So what was it like growing up there? What was your childhood like?
I would say that it was pretty American. I was lower middle class. Parents were together at first, eventually divorced. How
old were you?
It was by middle school where they were on the outs, right? They had different times of separation. There's a lot of just in the home. There just wasn't a lot of love, right? Between the two, it was a lot of friction. And
at what age did you notice that?
Early on, early on, and I'm always really grateful that, and this sounds odd, I guess, but I'm grateful that my parents showed me early what I wanted. Like for example, I learned early on that if the phone was ringing, I had to answer it. The reason why I was asked to answer it by my parents is because it was the creditors calling, right? And they didn't want to talk to the creditors because we were in a bad financial state. And it got worse, progressively worse, our financial state, and due to debt or what have you. And so once they got divorced, I remember clearly my mom was really struggling, and she couldn't afford to pay the heat. And so like the image of the shampoo frozen in the shower is really powerful. It really has stuck with me over the years, how shampoo changes. It's like it coagulates. It looks different when it freezes. And so all these things I look back on with such a tremendous sense of gratitude, because early on I said, you know what? I don't want to have debt in my life. It's not something that I'm interested in. I'm not going to allow money to, hurt my marriage. And I recognized what fighting did in terms of the spirit of the home. And so it's extremely rare that my wife and I argue, And the relationship that I have with my kids is really a deep one, special, really, really, really special. I got 4 kids, 3 daughters, 1 son.
Yeah.
But that's normal, right? Like what I went through is much better than some and would be considered much worse than others. But it's exactly what I needed to lay the foundation for my life. Mm-hmm. And so all those things that we went through, I'm really, really happy I went through them.
Mm-hmm. When you say you had a sense that you guys were having financial issues, how old were you at that age? Or how old were
ever
you when
since
you noticed that?
Since I can remember, I could clearly see, like I picked up very early on that there was a financial problem. So even when I was like 5, I would intentionally order the cheapest thing at McDonald's. Just because I just saw it, and I recognized that if I was spending more, this could lead to further argument, or this could lead to further stress. I could see my mom was usually working 2 or 3 jobs. My dad tried to have a business. It was up and down. Eventually, it folded. So I was keenly aware about that early on. I'm not exactly sure what spawned it, but it was there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What did your dad do?
Construction.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, construction, and he tried to have his own. He tried to have his own thing, and it just never really worked out for him. Mm-hmm. And it's weird too, because when we worked together, I would go on the job site with him, and we didn't always get along. And I think it was because he was under so much stress at work that it caused us to have friction. And it was like construction didn't come naturally for me. It just didn't. I didn't get it. I knew early on that it wasn't my thing, right? And it's carried over like later in life. Like I'm not the guy that goes to IKEA and builds the desk in a second.
Yeah.
Right? It just takes me longer than most people. But I also saw early on that and I actually love him for this, he didn't really teach me, he didn't really prep me well, right? As we were working, he wasn't really teaching me. Mm-hmm. And so I said to myself early on, I'm like, when I get a chance, if I'm working with somebody, if I ever mentor somebody, or if I'm ever a dad, I'm going to make sure that I really teach exactly what I'm doing as I'm doing it, so that the light bulbs have a chance to come on, and so that it might be possible that we have this like great experience, because we have a great chemistry when we were working together. And of course, I feel like now, and like especially because, and we might talk about this, but my daughter traveled the world with me when she was 14, and like literally she went with me to events all over the world where I spoke at. We did it for 6 months. She left school, and we never got into a single argument on the road in 6 months. That's almost impossible, Rob. Like, how does that happen? How do you not get in a single argument? And it wasn't because she was like spoiled, or because I would give in, or because I just said yes to everything. It wasn't like that. That's just the relationship that we had. But it was a constant focus on communicating and making sure that she understood the surroundings, what was going on. We're constantly having these great, wonderful conversations. It was a magical time period in my life.
Wow,
right?
that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I want to come back to that. But when your parents got divorced, you lived with your mom?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And where was your dad?
My dad, he moved to West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
I was living in Virginia, so it was about 6 hours away. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was in the car with my mother, and she said, "I want you to know your dad and I are getting divorced." So there's a tinge of sadness, and but mainly it was this overwhelming sense of gratitude, right? Because I'm like, finally, like, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Jeez, And as a child, you just want your parents to be happy. They were not the means to make each other happy.
Mm-hmm.
Obvious to me, they were not a good fit. And which is why later in life, when they got remarried and they found the ones that were a good fit, like, I loved it. Loved the fact that they were able to find somebody that was a good match, that could bring them happiness. And hopefully, in their twilight years, they're able to spend that time with and have joy versus feeling alone or feeling not understood, which is the root of really so much sadness in our society, right? So, again, it's just like one of those things I look back on and I feel good about it.
Yeah. So this was sort of, and for many, that's an influential time period in life. How often would you see your father during that period of time?
A few times a year, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe.
So through high school and kind of as you finished up middle school, you were pretty much with your mom. Did she get remarried soon after that?
No, I wouldn't say soon. I mean, I guess it was probably somewhere around 10 years later she got remarried.
Okay. Yeah, so you were through school, you were in your adult years, pretty much your early 20s by that time.
Yeah, I had a child by the time she got remarried again.
Okay, got it. So as far as men that were influential in your life at that period of time, did you have men that were? Or was it your mom
I would say
the
person, there was, it's so weird. The conversation of mentors is a weird one for me.
Okay.
Because I haven't had, I never feel like I've had like a major or mentor in my life. I've had heavy influencers, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would think the first one was my grandfather, my dad's dad. He almost became a Catholic priest, but he met my grandmother while he was going to whatever it's called, monastery, whatever, priest school, right? Lucky for me that he meets her. And so he doesn't become a Catholic priest. And he was as godlike, if you will, as anybody that I've ever met, right? So in other words, he was a man of very high integrity. He adored his family. He worked and just believed in being productive. He advanced well within his job. I mean, he just did everything. He had a model life in so many ways. And he had this like weekend home that we called the cottage that I spent all my summers in with him and his grandmother. And he was the great male influence in my life in the early years because he was so respect-worthy and amazing man. Amazing man. Then, when I was 20 years old, I went on a mission to Chile, and we have a boss of the mission, or a leader, if you will, called the mission president. And he was, once again, this is somebody that I said, if there is a God, if there is a Jesus, or whatever you believe, right? Like, this is what it probably would be like to be around that person. Two people that I've met like that, right? And so they really established, I think, certain things in me. And then the third one, if I could say one, would be my business partner at River Pools, my swimming pool company, who is my age. And once again, he's the type of person where when you're around him, you just behave better. You watch your words closer. You think a little bit longer about maybe making the sarcastic joke or about what is the right thing to do, because he really is such a man of high moral fiber and character that he makes me better around him. His name's Jason Hughes. So those are probably the three majors.
What did you call your grandfather?
Granddaddy.
Granddaddy. So when you were with your mom and the heat wasn't on, Did the extended family know that things were that tight, that the heat was getting turned off?
I think everybody knew that we were struggling financially, and they did help some. But it's just one of those things where, I mean, at first I didn't really, like many, I didn't necessarily recognize we were poor until the clothing element entered the fray in school. And I didn't know that clothes were supposed to match until I was like 12 or 13. And I remember one day in high school, there was this one kid, and he was picking on me, and he's like, "Yeah, Marcus there, he wears the same pants every day." I was like, I was like, there's a part of me that was embarrassed, but at the same time, I was just trying to understand. I was trying to understand. So it had its impact, it had its impact, and I know how big of a deal it was to go school shopping, clothing shopping, and you could sense the stress in my mom's eyes. There was a Christmas we had that my dad got us like a go-kart, right? And he got something else, and I remember feeling this emptiness or depression that day because I knew he'd put it on a credit card. And I was just thinking to myself, man, I don't want this. I don't want this.
It's interesting. Do you feel you felt that way at the time, or when you reflect on that?
No, at the time.
It's almost like you had a wisdom there somehow, that those are unique things for young folks to be thinking about.
Well, I think early on I simplified cause and effect. And I think that's maybe one of the biggest reasons that I've had any semblance of success in business, is because I'm like, oh, there's that, and that equals that. And sometimes, that is a struggle for people. And they make simple things complex. And for that reason, whether it's sales or whether it's marketing or whether it's launching this or that, they overcomplicate it, and nothing actually gets done or it takes too long. And things were cut and dry for me early on. I'm like, money's not bad. It's just getting into debt is a really bad thing. And it can cause a lot of problems within families. And if I have a choice, I'm not going to get into that issue, right? So that's why, I said by the time I'm 40 years old, I don't want to have a house payment, right? And that's exactly what happened, right? I don't have a house payment at 40 years old. I don't think that I would have been that guy if I hadn't have gone through that when I was 11, 12, 13 years old.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. What kind of student were you, or just what kind of kid were you in high school?
I was a fun kid. I was a bit of a crack up, but I was a jock, not in the bad sense of yo Adrian jock, but I was the guy that did 3 sports. I could see there was some leadership early because I was the captain of the football team, captain of the wrestling team, and captain of the baseball team when I was in high school. So I played a sport all year round. Very average student. 2.3 or 4 GPA. Lucky to get into college. 990 on my SATs. Went to West Virginia because you didn't have to be that smart to get into West Virginia University. And my uncle owned a townhouse there that he said you could stay in if you want to come to West Virginia. I loved their football team. You didn't have to be, again, terribly smart or have incredible grades. So I said, perfect. So I couldn't have gotten into the Virginia Techs or even the JMUs, James Madison Universities in Virginia, like all my friends went to. Went to West Virginia. Once again, really glad I went there.
How did you know that you actually wanted to go to college?
It seemed like the thing everybody did.
Okay, so there was a culture in the school that next step is college.
It was just assumed.
Yeah.
Even from my parents, it was just, they both went to college. Right?
Okay, they did.
So that was assumed, but I went to college as a physical ed major. I was going to be a PE teacher because I love sports, makes sense.
Yeah.
But once what happened was I was in college for 2 years as a PE major. And then I went on a mission for 2 years to Chile. When I got back, I realized, you know what, $30,000 a year, which is what teachers were making out of PE teachers were making on average out of college. I don't think that's going to sustain a family. So that's when I started looking at different paths.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you went to college for 2 years, then you went on the mission?
Yeah, then I went on a mission.
Why
My
did you go
family
on?
flat out freaked out on that one. So I actually joined the Mormon church when I was 17 years old by myself.
Okay.
And
And
I met the
was your
missionaries.
family Catholic?
As a senior in high school, my family was hardcore Catholic.
Yeah.
Well, not my mom and dad,
Okay.
but my grandparents,
Yeah.
my grandfather, who I adored, very hardcore Catholic. So when I joined the Latter-day Saint, the LDS church, I didn't tell anybody except my mom and dad. They didn't really, because they weren't religious themselves anymore, I knew that they couldn't say, well, you can't do that, right? But I didn't tell my family for at least, the extended family, for at least a year. And so as I grew spiritually, if you will, in college and became more firm in my beliefs, I said, you know what? I want to go on a mission. I want to go on a mission. And so one day I'm sitting in the student union watching all these students go by, whatever. I said, all right, time to do it. So I pinned a letter. This is really before email, right? So I pinned a letter to my grandparents and I said, all right, so here's the deal. I'm Mormon and I'm going to go on a mission for 2 years. I'm leaving college and I know this is going to break your hearts. But I want you to know that at the core, we believe in the same thing, right? We believe in the Christian principles, if you will, right? This is what we believe in together. And their disappointment was profound. It was like a bomb went off in the family that reverb to my dad had 4 brothers and sisters, and each one of them was shocked, and everybody was just like, what are you doing? My uncle, who's, if you recall, that's the townhouse I was staying in college, he offered me $10,000 not to go on the mission, which was huge money for me at the time. He's like, you don't understand, when people leave college, they don't come back. That's not what they do. They say they're going to come back, they don't come back. But for me, I'm like, but this is normal. This is what I'm going to, I feel like this is what I'm supposed to do. And so I've always just trusted my promptings. So I trusted my promptings when I felt like, I want to join this church because it's just, whatever reason, it felt like the right thing for me. And maybe it was the fact that I met an LDS family when I was in high school, and I saw that they had this, called it a family.
What's LDS?
Latter-day Saints. All right. So the church is named the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They call them LDS or Mormons, either one, right? Mm-hmm. And so I met this family that was LDS, and I said, I went to an activity at their house. I didn't know it was an activity. They called it a home evening or a family home evening. And basically, they had this nice lesson that was it's just a spiritual be a better person lesson. Sung a hymn, said a prayer. They had an activity that was a game, and they had a snack as a family. I'm like, this is the coolest thing. I'd never done that. I grew up eating dinner with TV trays watching Jeopardy. Not necessarily a bad thing, but we didn't have incredible communication in the home. There wasn't this feeling. I'm like, this is interesting to me. I want to understand what's going on here, right? So that planted the seeds. At which point I said, I'm interested in talking to these Mormon missionaries. And I didn't have any plans to be a missionary, but as I grew in college and just had some experiences that said, Marcus, that's what you're supposed to do. And so that's when I did it. Family was shocked, but I went to Chile for 2 years, and that's what changed my whole life. Mm-hmm. Everything. That's when I realized that I wasn't normal in certain regards. Like, I'm normal in 99% of all things, like everybody else. But there were certain things that happened that told me, wow, this could change my life. Mm-hmm. Can I share a couple of those? Is it all right if I share a couple of those? So one of the things was that that I went out with a group of missionaries. There's about a dozen of us, but there's about 200 missionaries at the southern tip of Chile where I was at. And when we were done with the mission, we were just talking as we were coming home, We were talking about the success we had and the people that we were able to bring into the gospel, right? And in our case, we it wasn't a numbers thing, but people were just talking about, people they had baptized and things like that. But it wasn't a braggadocious thing. It was just talking about it, right? Because you don't brag about that type of thing. And I realized that compared to everybody else, that the amount of people that had joined the church that I had talked to was an abnormally high, very high number. And during the mission, I recognized something, that I could teach things more effectively than other people. And again, it wasn't an arrogance. It was a self-awareness. It was you know what? Something that I'm doing is resonating well with people. At which point the mission president, later on in the mission, he says to me, the way you're teaching is different, and I want you to teach the rest of the missionaries exactly what you're doing. And for me, it was simplicity. It was ways to say things that people said, I got it. I understand. So I recognize that. One other thing happened one time. This story's a little bit longer, but this is the one that really, really changed my life to my beliefs today as a communicator. And that is, I had about 3 months in Chile. And I couldn't speak the language well at all. It was a major struggle for me, Rob. I mean, I was really man, I even said, I'm going to go to the doctor, check my ears, because I'm getting Spanish so slow. I came there, I didn't know any Spanish, right? Thrown into the fire, just kind of learn it. Mm-hmm. 3 months in, I don't know it, and I have a Latino companion, and he's from Chile. And we're teaching this person, and she decides to be baptized. And she knows everybody in the community. And so she invites everybody to her baptism, which is a pretty big deal for missionaries, because you got a baptism and you got all these people from the community that are going to come and watch it. So it's a big deal. You have an opportunity to do something really special where people say, hey, I'm interested in learning about this as well. And so we a few hours before this ceremony, we fill up the font. And so you get baptized in a font. And in the LDS church.
What's a font?
A font is like a really big bathtub.
Okay.
Right? And so it takes a couple hours to fill it up with hot water. So we fill it up a couple hours beforehand with the font. It's ready to go. And then everybody comes in to the big meeting room. And there's tons of people there. So you have all the members of the congregation there. You have 2 other missionaries that are female missionaries, and they've brought a bunch of people that are learning about the church. And this lady that's getting baptized, she brought a ton of people that are learning about the church. Right? So there's all this stuff that's going on, and I'm really, really excited. We're excited, and so we have a few opening remarks, and then we tell everybody, okay, we're going to go ahead and proceed with the baptism, at which point how it works is you open the font doors, the person walks in from the back of the font, walks into the font, and everybody can watch. Right? And that's pretty much the end of the ceremony. Well, in this case, we go to the font to open the doors, and the font is empty. And we don't know how it's empty. And immediately, the 2 sister female missionaries and my companion, the Latino, all of them are Latinos, by the way, from Chile, they all start to freak out. And I'm just looking down at the empty font. And it's one of those slow motion moments, Rob, where literally I felt their 3 heads turned to me almost like, Marcus, what are you going to do? It was a really wild moment. Mm-hmm. And so I looked at them and I said, everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. And so we got everybody together back into the chapel. And I recognized that we could fill the font with cold water in 1 hour. In 1 hour, 2 hours hot, 1 hour cold. So we had to figure out a way to keep everybody in the room for an hour, right? So I stood in front of the room, and I don't know, probably a couple hundred people in there, and I asked a question. It was a simple question. And somebody answered the question. When they answered the question, I asked them to expound on their answer. And they expounded on it, and then I looked at somebody else and I said, well, what did you think of that just now? And then within a couple of minutes, I found myself just leading a conversation, and it was the wildest thing, Rob, because it was this spiritual feeling just like settled on the room, and everybody could feel it. It was an intensity in the air, but it was a joyful sharing amongst people, right? And before you know it, my fellow companion missionary is waving to me in the back, and like that, an hour had passed. And we went and we had the service, and it went beautifully. And that night, the lady that we were staying with, the Chilean lady that we were staying with in her home, she came to me and she said, Elder Sheridan, which is what they call missionaries, elders.
Mm-hmm.
Elder Sheridan, something happened tonight. You're normally terrible at this language. Chilean people, Latinos, are very frank. They tell you, if you're gaining weight, hey, you look fat. That's just how it's just, you're normally terrible with the language. You dominated the language tonight. You dominated the language. And I realized what had happened was all I did was I asked the right questions. I don't know if I made a single statement, but I asked the right questions. And that's when I said, far and away, the greatest way to teach is to ask the right questions, because I can't get people to own anything unless they own it for themselves. And so my philosophy since that time, literally since I was 22 years old, finishing up the mission, was, it's not my goal to tell people what I want to tell them. It's my goal to help them discover for themselves what I want to tell them without actually telling them.
Mm-hmm.
And if I ask the right questions, not in a manipulative way, but truly ask the right questions that lead to self-discovery, well, then they just might own that thing. And that's the reason why my career as a speaker took off. Mm-hmm. That one single principle. I recognize it's never about me.
When did you realize that?
I recognized it while I was right there in that moment in Chile. Mm-hmm. So I recognized it was through the obsession with asking great questions that led to great transformations in people. Self-reflection, right? But the plan for me wasn't just be a speaker right away. I knew I wanted to be a speaker, but I had to go back to college. I was still young, I was 22, 23 years old. And that didn't take off for another 10 years.
When you say you knew you wanted to be a speaker,
yeah.
Are you talking about when you were on your mission?
Yeah.
You realized that?
I realized it on the mission.
Okay.
Because the president had me talk to large crowds of people.
But in first of all, did you even realize you could make a living doing that, or were there other ideas, like maybe
Not
you
really.
would do it for the church or something
right,
like that?
Right, yeah. I just knew that was the place I was supposed to be.
Okay.
That I had been so successful helping other missionaries become better teachers and better communicators. Mm-hmm. I'm like, this is the thing that I'm supposed to do. And so naturally I became a pool guy, right? Because that's how it works.
Of course, that's sitting there thinking,
how it works.
Okay. So where was Nikki during all of this?
She, when I said I want to go on a mission, she happens to be LDS too.
Okay.
And that's how I learned about the Mormon church. Mm-hmm. But what was interesting is through her. But I didn't do it because of her. In fact, I told her I want to talk to the Mormon missionaries, but I don't want you to be there because I don't want you to have any part of this. And then once I was baptized, I said to her, I want to go on a mission. And she's like, really? Wow. Well, if you go, perfect. I think I'll go as well. And so it was one of those things that a lot of people thought I was doing it for her. Clearly not, right? It was just what felt right. Mm-hmm. It's what felt right to me.
Was she LDS before?
Yeah, she was always
growing
LDS.
up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's how I was wondering.
That was the initial
while
connection
you were
to the
in
church.
School. And I grew up Catholic as well. I don't have any affiliation with that now, but I know how strong that can be.
Yeah, I was an altar boy, right?
Yeah.
You probably were too. Yeah. So that I went through that whole nine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. And then when you came back, was it hard to finish college, or were you focused, like, I really have to get this
It was
done?
so easy.
Okay.
With the child, my GPA for the 2 years that I got back was 3.9.
Mm-hmm. Were you still in the townhouse?
No. By this point, we got an apartment, and we were wonderfully poor.
Mm-hmm.
And
were you paying for your own school, or did you have help?
Student loans.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I got student loans, and I had a full-time job waiting tables.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because that's how you can make the most money in college, is by waiting tables, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Right, way more than minimum wage.
Mm-hmm.
And
where'd you do it?
At a seafood restaurant.
And like a local
I think
place?
I think everybody should start it as a server at Pizza Hut, and then I went to Bob Evans, and then I went to a nicer seafood restaurant,
Mm-hmm.
and I became literally great at waiting tables. And I had this whole system, and they gave me an entire floor, and I realized early on, I was like telling myself, everybody in the world should wait tables,
Mm-hmm.
because it teaches you how to talk to people, but it forces you to create systems and create order. You almost have your own little business down there, right? And so literally by the time I was done, I worked there for those final 2 years. By the time I was done, I had an entire floor where I was able to wait the tables myself. But it was just little things, right? Little things. You bring people water before they ask for it, Rob. Why do we wait to bring them water? Little things like that, I realized, wow, that makes an impression on people. And it helped me to be very successful and support a family
Mm-hmm.
with a child, not go into further debt while we were in college.
Mm-hmm. Did Nikki and you go to West Virginia together? Was that intentional?
Once we got married, we got married as soon as I was done with the mission.
Uh-huh.
That's when she went to West Virginia with me. But she
same
had no
age?
interest. Yeah, same age, but she had no interest in college.
Where was she before that?
She was working.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, working back where we grew up. She had no interest in college.
Uh-huh.
Then she went on a mission with me to a different place. She went to California.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got married quickly after. Knew it was the one. She was the one. And but she never had the desire to go to college. She always just wanted to be a mom.
Mm-hmm.
And if she hadn't have wanted to, I would have said great. But that's what she wanted. And so I've done everything I could to facilitate that, since the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So she's never really worked since we've been married. She had a little job for, a few weeks or something like that in college. But for the most part, it's always been me. And that was great for us. It worked for us.
Yeah. When you graduated college and you finished in 4 years, basically, other than the breakup of when you were on the mission, you went into what business from there?
So I was actually, when I got back from the mission, I said, I can't be a PE teacher. They don't make enough money, so I want to just hurry up and go get a job.
Uh-huh.
So I need to hurry up and graduate. Usually when you change your major, you end up losing time. Right, it takes longer to graduate. I actually ended up graduating in about 3.5 years, but I changed my major to Spanish. I took a test, and I basically clept out of a year of school because I spoke Spanish better than most of my English-speaking professors, right? Because by that point, 2 years, I was really, really good at speaking Spanish. I used to dream in Spanish. I used to think in Spanish, right? That's when you know you're there. And so I just wanted to get an interview. I figured if I could get an interview, I could get a job because I knew how at this point to talk to people. And so I found this supplemental education learning program for kids. Thought it might be fun. It was in D.C., and so I went to take a job in D.C. right out of college. One interview, got the job, and so I said, this looks interesting. I'm there for 2 weeks, and I immediately realized not the right thing for me. And so my wife and I say, you know what? Before we take root here in D.C., let's go back to where we came from, the Northern Neck. Let's figure out what we want to do. And right when we got back, my two friends that went to church with me had just started a business. And they were installing above-ground swimming pools out of the back of a pickup truck. And they had just literally opened up this little retail store selling pool chemicals and hot tubs. It's called River Pools and Spas. And they said, do you want to come work in the store here? You run the store while we're installing pools in the field. And I said, yeah, sure, until I figure out what I want to do with my life. 6 months in, they said, why don't you become a partner? And I ended up becoming a partner, and that led to life as a pool guy.
So when you started at River Pools and Spas, where they were just opening up the storefront or whatnot, how old were you? 24, 25 years old?
Yeah, 24
Okay.
probably.
Been married a couple years at this point.
Yep.
You have your daughter, Danielle.
Yep.
And you haven't had JT?
JT, yep, nice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So you're running this, and what year was that?
Well, we officially started the business in 2001.
2001.
Yeah.
Okay. So how were things going? Because we're going to get to, kind of the moment, but how were things going up until then? It was like a startup.
It was a struggle.
Yeah. I mean,
it was always
three
a
of you,
fight.
how are you making money?
It was always a fight. In fact, we fought like crazy, and we were creative. We were aggressive. And we started.
When you say fight, do you mean as partners, or you were fighting for business?
No. I learned early on that actually we would argue as partners, but because we had the exact same values, the partnership was wonderful. Lots of times partnerships don't work out in business, and there's a clear reason for it. Almost always it's the same reason. It's because when one person thinks something is okay, in other words, honest or good, and another person thinks it's not honest or not good or not kosher, now all of a sudden the partnership is doomed because you have a different level of integrity at that point. Mm-hmm. So because we shared a core set of beliefs of what's right and what's wrong always, the fact that we were very different was very helpful to us. Right? It actually worked in our favor. So we're very different. We had those disagreements, but we fought in terms of working 60 plus hours a week. Yeah. Doing the home shows, doing the events, and borrowing money from parents when we had to, not mine, of course, but from my other two business partners, doing whatever we could to keep the business alive. And we started to have some success. But we, like many, we didn't know how to do the technical side of things, like bookkeeping. So we hired a bookkeeper in 2000, and I think it was 4, because we just didn't understand that stuff. It was beyond us. I wasn't, savvy at all with anything like a QuickBooks or any accounting. So we hired a bookkeeper, and she was one of the hardest workers we'd ever had. And it turns out that she embezzled a ton of money from us in the year that she was with us. And during that year plus that she was with us, didn't make sense because we were growing the business in sales, but we kept seeming to have financial struggles. Yet every week, I'd see her go to the bank, and she says, I'm going to go pay our taxes, I'm going to go do payroll, I'm going to do this and that. But we started to have problems. And I didn't understand it until one day the head of the bank came in. And the head of the bank called me and said, Marcus, is your bookkeeper there? And I said, yes. And she said, you need to get her out of the building as soon as possible. I said, why? She said, she's been stealing money from you, and a lot of it. And so it turns out that she had embezzled a few $100,000 from us. And she hadn't paid our taxes. She filed them each week without paying them. So not only had I lost a few $100,000, but now I was in debt to the IRS. And the IRS, for those that don't know this, has no mercy. None. They are unforgiving. If you've been embezzled from, they don't care. It's your job. It's your responsibility. And I kind of understand why. And so this all happened in that 2005, 2006 timeframe when a lot of pool companies were doing great because the economy was good. Thought the margins were good, but it was one of those things where I wouldn't say that none of us felt fat and happy. I mean, I didn't make over $100,000 a year until I think my final year of being a pool guy. Mm-hmm. Now, I still own the company today, but in terms of my final full-time year of being a pool guy was probably around 2011. Mm-hmm. So it took me 10 years before I made, as an owner of the company, 6 figures.
Yeah. You were 3 partners.
Yeah.
So that's hard.
It's harder.
Yeah. How big of a company has it gotten to, or where was it at that point?
Well, at the time, I think we probably had about a dozen employees or something like that. Maybe 15 to probably about a dozen. Yeah. At the time of the embezzlement. And so, we go through the embezzlement. It's 2007. There's another good year left. Mm-hmm. So we go through 2007. We're finally picking it up.
Can I ask you about the embezzlement for a second?
Yeah.
Because I'm curious about what your mind state was like when that happened. What were you?
It's extremely difficult. I learned, unfortunately, and this is what you learn as a business owner, that people will let you down. That if you're not Sometimes you have to be, it jades you, man. People will steal from you. And I just didn't think people did that.
Yeah.
I was naive.
Yeah.
And turned out she had a gambling addiction online, an online gambling addiction. So all the money was gone. We couldn't get any of it back. And she went to jail. And so sad, too, because she had 2 kids. It was a pretty big deal in our county. And it's just the whole thing was just terrible. And the whole thing was just brutal to take on. But the hardest part was when the IRS came in and said that they had liens on her house and they didn't blink.
Yeah. I think about, I've had my business since I graduated college, since 27 years. I've been through all this stuff that you're talking about, very similar stories. And I always think, first, as you know, and as you and I have experienced personally, we all have our struggle. She had hers. She taught you a lesson that'll live on for your business career, and it was a hugely valuable lesson, because when we're naive with our books and we just trust, we have to take personal responsibility on that, and that's the lesson as entrepreneurs. I think that comes to light when you're not paying attention to it.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so I forgave her, and I don't have negative feelings towards her. Now, of course, I have the luxury of hindsight today. And I don't know if I would feel that way if we had lost the company. I'd like to think I would. But it needed to happen. We needed the pain. And by 2007, the economy's still good. We recover some. Beginning of 2008, it's going great. I think, man, we're finally leaving this difficult period. And I think we pretty much pay up our debts, and then, bam, September 2008, the market just out of nowhere collapses. And within 48 hours of the collapse, where the Dow just dropped in one day it dropped down to like 7,500. We lost 5 deposits of people that were getting a pool that said, hey, we're going to get this pool. They just withdrew it because they were so afraid. So that's about $250,000 in losses in the first 48 hours. And over the coming weeks and months, it got worse and worse. By January of 2009, I went through a period where I was three weeks overdrawn in my personal bank account. In our business bank account. Mm-hmm. All of our credit cards were maxed out.
All 3 partners.
All 3 partners. We weren't getting paid. So if we were making our home payments, it was because we were borrowing money from family. It was, or putting it on a credit card. Absolutely. Uh-huh. It was.
How was Nikki?
A total. She was, this is such an amazing wife. She was worried to death because she saw the strain in my eyes. But things were so bad, Rob, that when I got home, she never said, so how was your day? Because she already knew how my day was. It sucked. So instead of that, she focused on, can I distract him? Can we have a great time? Can I help him escape what is the grind? Mm-hmm. She didn't complain the fact that I was leaving at 6 a.m. and getting home so much at 11 o'clock at night. Amazing, amazing wife.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When did you guys have JT?
My wife's a planner, so we had every child 3 years apart.
3 years apart. Yeah. So was he born while this was going on then?
Yeah, right.
Or was he already?
Yeah, around I guess he was born in, he was born around 2003. And then my next one was born around 2007.
Okay, so you had 3 kids when this was going on.
Yeah.
Do you feel that they felt that energy that you were coming around
I
with?
know this. My wife tells me that I completely missed my son's first 2 years. She tells me stories about how he was sick all the time. I don't remember him. I really don't remember him. And, but I'm not going to sit here and say, gee, I feel terrible about that. because everything has its season. And daggone, I've made up for it. You know what I mean? I feel like these days that my kids would say, my dad is so stinking present. Even though somebody might say, dude, you travel 125, 150 nights a year. There's no way you're present. No, I'm present. We have choice experiences together, but I missed the first two, whiffed them completely with my son.
Yeah. And well, I read somewhere that you try to do, is it called the 30-hour trip or something? So you're home.
Yeah. Well, when I became a speaker, I constantly have 30-hour trips. Most people don't do this, but basically what that means is I'll leave my house around 6 o'clock at night, sometimes 5 or 6, catch the latest flight out, get to the event or venue midnight, whatever it is, do the event in the morning, and then come immediately home, right? And so oftentimes I'm home somewhere between 20 and 35 hours.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So all this pain, all this lead up, you're about to file bankruptcy, the account's overdrawn, all this is going on, and your mind is thinking, how can I figure this out? Right. And you figured out this formula, which was very successful for the company, and obviously has accelerated everything else from a business standpoint, as far as I can tell.
It's changed everything. In fact, it's changed businesses all over the world, Rob. That's what's fun about it.
Yeah, it has.
So I was reading about the internet, right? Yeah. And I was like, this is once again, my self-awareness was like, dude, you're starting to learn everything online. And clearly, people are learning all about pools online, and no pool companies are really, really using the internet. I also started to read lots of fancy phrases like inbound marketing, content marketing, social media blogging, digital, all this stuff. And so as I read this stuff, in my simple pool guy mind, I'm like, okay, so what you're telling me is if I just obsess over my customers' questions, and I'm willing to address them, good, bad, or ugly, I'm willing to address them on my website through text and video, I just might save my business. So we embraced a philosophy that I called They Ask You Answer, which basically meant this. We said, if anybody has a question, again, good, bad, or ugly, we're going to address it. And if we do this, maybe they'll learn it from us. And because they learn it from us, maybe they'll trust us. And if they trust us, maybe they'll contact us. And maybe we'll win the deal. And so we took every question that we'd ever been asked, brainstormed them out, and we started to answer them one by one. And let me just give you one example of this. One of the first questions I was always asked as a pool guy was, how much does a fiberglass pool cost? And in 2010 or 9, when I started this process of They Ask You Answer, no swimming pool company in the world, Rob, had addressed on their website how much does an in-ground or how much does a fiberglass swimming pool cost. That's what we sold mainly, is fiberglass pools. And so I said, well, of course we're going to address this They Ask You Answer. And I explained it. I said it's a lot like buying a car. There's a lot of options and accessories. Here's what would drive it up. Here's what would keep it down. Here's some, different packages that people choose, complex to simple. Here's some different ranges as to what you might spend. And I said, I can't give you an exact cost, but at least I can give you a really, really great feel. And something wild happened as soon as I published that article. People started calling me and saying, thank you. Finally, somebody was willing to address this subject that nobody in the world seems to be willing to address. Because you see, people don't practice buying pools. They don't know, Rob. Just like with most products and services, at first, they don't know. And so they said, thank you. Trust started. But also, from a search perspective, I started getting tons of visitors to the site for that particular page. And those visitors led to leads. And because we were tracking it, by this point, I had adopted this little tool, startup called HubSpot at the time, which today is a huge tool. But I was one of HubSpot's first customers. And I was using and I was tracking it. To make a long story short, since that day it was written, that one single article has generated over $5 million in revenue. How much does a fiberglass pool cost? That we would not have had we not been willing to address the question. And here's what's crazy about it, Rob. To this day, most companies, especially B2B service-based businesses, don't address cost and price on their website. And why? Because of the competition, because we don't want to scare them away, and because we say, well, it depends and every job is different. Well, those are the exact same 3 reasons swimming pool companies didn't address them. And what's crazy is this. For 90% of our clients, because now, of course, we teach companies how to do this, the number one traffic lead in sales generating content that they produce is cost and price. Cost and price. Mm-hmm. And so it's been an amazing ride. Yet most companies still don't do it.
Did you have any pushback from your partners when you wanted to do this?
Oh, I had pushback on a few things. They trusted me because they could see that I did seem to have a little bit of an acumen for thinking like a buyer, right? The one that really freaked them out was one night I was sitting with a couple. This is when I was a pool guy, probably around 2010. And at the end of 2.5 hours together, like always, I'd give a quote. And they said, Marcus, we like you. We do. We think we want to do business with you, but if we don't do business with you, is there anybody else that you might recommend? And I thought to myself, man, I really hate this question. Because if they're going to ask this, they're probably not going to buy. And they did not buy the pool that night. But I had a long drive home, and I thought to myself, Rob, well, they asked the question, which means I have to answer it. They ask, you answer. So I went home that night, and I wrote an article on the site that was, who are the best pool builders in Richmond, Virginia? Review/ratings. And I came up with a list of 5 of the best pool builders in Richmond, Virginia.
Yeah.
And here's what's crazy. I'm not on that list of 5. Now you say, you're not on that list of 5. Why not, Marcus? Well, first of all, if they're reading it, where are they? They're on my site. I'm winning. And second, if I make a best of list and I put myself on said list, what happens? I lose trust, right? I lose credibility. And trust is always the name of the game when it comes to business. That's the one eternal element of owning a business. 100 years from now, business is going to be built on trust. It's the one thing we can all say, yeah, we have that in common, because everybody wants to say so much how they're not the same thing, because we fight to this idea that we're so different than everybody else. When fundamentally, the reason why somebody gives you money, Rob, is the same reason they gave it to me as a pool guy, is because they trust you enough to say, I believe in you. That is business, right? And so, because I was willing to address this, to make a long story short, today if you go online and you search best pool builders, Richmond, Virginia, or if you're researching any of my competitors, generally speaking, you're going to learn about my competitors on my website. I had a lady come to me literally like 3 or 4 years ago. And she said, Marcus, the craziest thing happened. I was this close to buying a pool from Playmore Pools. That's our biggest competitor in Richmond, Virginia. Playmore Pools. They're still around. Go look them up. And she said, but before I signed the contract with them, I decided to go online and research their company. And as I was researching their company, I stumbled across this article that you guys had written. I said, my goodness, these guys are so honest, I should probably call them too. And of course, you know what happened, because otherwise I wouldn't be telling the story, right? They bought a pool, and that year, that one article, who are the best pool builders in Richmond, Virginia, generated $150,000 in revenue that we would not have had we not been willing to address the question. Yet some people will still say, Rob, yeah, but aren't you afraid you've now introduced them to the competition? People aren't dumb. Even the uninformed will become the informed. And so the moment that we as businesses say, consumer ignorance is no longer a viable sales and marketing strategy, it gives us this amazing ability to teach people and communicate with them on a level that has never been done within our industry. So to make a long story short, we became the Wikipedia of pools. We became the most trafficked swimming pool website in the world. Today we get 700,000 visitors a month. And we were getting so much traffic, so many leads, that not only did we become the largest fiberglass pool installer in the country, but I was getting so many leads outside of my area. People saying, will y'all please install my pool? I learned everything about you guys, or from you guys. We basically took the money that we had gained 2011, 12, 13, 14, put it back into the business, built a manufacturing facility. This year we'll manufacture 250 fiberglass swimming pools, which is crazy because that's our first full year manufacturing. And we'll probably be the largest manufacturer, not just installer, but manufacturer of fiberglass pools in the U.S. within the next 7 to 10 years. And just really quick, to put this in perspective for the viewer or listener, It's like we were a Chevrolet dealer that was writing about automobiles.
Mm-hmm.
And the Chevrolet dealer became the largest automobile retailer in the U.S. and eventually became larger than Ford, Chevy, Toyota, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And will be there in short order.
Wow.
All because of a philosophy.
And how large is the company now?
Today we have about 65 employees.
Mm-hmm.
We have a run rate of about $10 million a year. So it's not a huge company, but it's pretty large for a swimming pool company.
Yeah. Wow. And at what point did you say, you know what? The real business I want to be in is teaching people how to do this in their business, and I'm going to step away from the pool business and let the partners run it.
Yeah.
And start the sales
Okay,
line.
yeah, I love it. So we start as a company, They Ask You Answer 2009. That's when I started blogging and doing all this stuff. And by November of that year, I realized this is working. And I'm just the type of guy that wants to tell everybody stuff is working, right? That's how I roll, right? So November of 2009, I give myself a birthday present. And the birthday present is a blog called The Sales Lion. I love lions, okay? And
thank you. I've been so curious why you
well,
called
I
it
had
the
also had a
Sales
reading disability when I was a kid. I was not a good reader. And the first book that I ever read was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
So I had this affinity towards lions.
Yeah.
There's actually a couple other reasons, but that's the biggest reason. And it didn't make sense calling it the marketing lion because I realized early on that if you want to get something rejected in business, you call it a marketing initiative. If you want to get something approved, you call it sales. Right? So just call it the sales lion because it sounded right. And I just started writing my thoughts on business and what I was doing with river pools. And at first, nobody listened. But I didn't really care because I felt prompted. Clearly, you're supposed to talk about this. Talk about it. Write it. And so I was committed to it. I did 3 pieces of content a week. And again, I don't think anybody listened for about a year. And then all of a sudden, people started to listen. And I had a couple companies say, you know what? I would love to learn how to do that. And then a couple conferences said, you know what? Will you tell that pool story at my event? Like, okay. And so as soon as and of course, if you recall, I always knew that I wanted to speak. But by this point, 2009, 10, when I'm going through this They Ask You Answer, I'm at a very high peak level. Around 2008, I had reinvested in personal development. So it's just at peak state for They Ask You Answer. It just all happened at the right time, and I think I was ready for it, and I was chomping at the bit to do something greater and to impact more people. And that's why it was perfect timing, because quickly I realized with the sales line, even with river pools and producing content, I could touch a lot more people than just selling a pool in a home, which no longer satisfied me whatsoever. Getting a deal didn't satisfy. So I wanted more. In 2009, even though it was still a financial struggle, we were mentally, I was just at again, I can't say it any other way than at a high state of learning and of ideation, and it all was happening. And so by 2011, I realized I'm really onto something. And so that year, I slowly stopped being a pool guy, and I started to become a digital sales and marketing guy. And by 2012, I had stepped out. The pool company was off to the races. My 2 business partners knew that I wasn't supposed to be a pool guy. In fact, one time when I was teaching at a swimming pool event around 2000, early 11, we had such a magical experience at the event because I was the guy that was pretty much doing all the speaking. It was so powerful and people were so just like emotional. It was just like one of those days where everybody just leaves the event and they just want to go lay down, right? Because it's like this, I mean, for me, it was just, it's hard to describe. Coming home on a flight with my business partner, Jason, the one that I talked about earlier is one of the 3 major male influences in my life. And he looks over at me, he's like, you're not supposed to be a pool guy. And how many business partners say, you're not supposed to, even though I was bringing value, how many say that? And then how many bridge you financially to the point where your business is self-sustaining? That's special.
That is special.
And Jim and Jason, my 2 business partners, did just that. And so once the speaking happened, it snowballed. And I think it was because I didn't try to sound smart, Rob. Ever. I think the message was so simple. Be the best teacher in the world. Obsess over your customers' questions. Be willing to address it even if nobody else is. And because I could do that in a way that people just got it and it resonated, it really took off.
Mm-hmm.
It really, really took off.
And did you have a design for the business, or were you getting inquiries from people that said, hey, I'll pay you to come in and look at my business and help me optimize, my site and write the right things so I'm generating how did it start to monetize?
It was a philosophy of they ask you answer. So at first it was just a blog and people started commenting on my stuff. And I recognized there's a problem. There's a lot of frustrated marketers out there. Mm-hmm. Why? Because they couldn't seem to get the rest of their team to buy in. And so I started talking about how important it was to get your team to buy into these philosophies. And one day, this gal, her name's Krista, she contacts me from a medical imaging company. And she says, Marcus, I believe in this stuff that you're teaching. I mean, I really believe in it. And I want to become, like you say, the Wikipedia of our space. And I want to embrace they ask you answer. But the problem is I'm not a subject matter expert. And when I go to my sales team, I go to my leadership team, I go to my engineers, and I say, help me produce this content. They said, that's not what we do. Or we don't have the time, right? And so she said something that really just quickly changed my course. She said, would you come to my organization and convince the rest of my team that they want to be a part of marketing? And I'm like, yeah. And she said, how much? And I'm like, I said, $4,500 for the day, which for me was a fortune. Flat out fortune, Rob. And I went home and I told my wife, I'm going to speak to this company. Guess how much I'm going to make? And I think she said like $500. And I said $4,500 for the day. And she just started to cry. She couldn't believe it. Fantastic. She couldn't believe it. Mm-hmm. Unbelievable. And I thought that was a fortune. I really did. Mm. And that was probably the first year I made over $100,000 in a year. Was right around 2011, 2012.
It's a neat story. I love the emotion. At that point, 2011, you've got 4 kids. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So you got the pool company. Now you're starting up the marketing consulting business, I guess, and that's taking off now. You wrote the book, which has been...
Book didn't happen until 2017.
Okay, so it was about 6 or 7 years into it till you wrote the book. Okay, got it.
Which I'm really glad I didn't write They Ask You Answer until then, because if I had written it in 2000 and like say 13 or 14, it would have been a book about blogging.
Yeah.
Because I wrote it in 2017, I realized for me, it developed into a philosophy of business. So They Ask You Answer is way more than listening to their questions and the willingness to address them. They Ask You Answer is it could be this for you, Rob. It could be you saying, you know what, I don't consume video as a business owner, but I recognize today that the majority of my clients, they want to see it in order to believe it. And if they want to see it, well, then we need to embrace video. It doesn't matter my opinion. Right. All that matters is, what does the marketplace want? Or it's a matter of, we sell it this way. We've always sold it this way. But, people have been telling me it would be really nice if I could buy it this way. And so I can either say, let's continue to put the square peg in the round hole, or I can say, is it possible that we sell it that way? You see, that's what They Ask You Answer developed into, a philosophy. It also became a book about sales and marketing, not just marketing, because I realized that the biggest issue that we had in our space was a silo between the two, marketers feeling alone. And so, I've since that one call about, Marcus, can you convince our team, I've taught over 200 workshops around the world to sales and marketing teams, getting them on the same page because we have a major problem with it. But I didn't know all these things at first, Rob. I literally was practicing, I was eating my own dog food, right? I was listening to what they were telling me, hey, here's a problem, and I just started to implement it.
Mm-hmm. And at what point you were doing the workshops? At what point were you doing like these keynote talks?
They all kind of happened at the same time. They seemed to feed each other.
Mm-hmm.
Workshops would feed keynotes. Keynotes would feed workshops. It grew and grew, and the style of the speaking I thought really set me apart.
Mm-hmm.
Because really, what's happened? I mean, in the course of like 5 years, I've gone from my first gig to full-time professional speaking.
Yeah.
And this is without without being an astronaut. This is without doing something that, you can become a professional speaker, if you land a plane on the Hudson River quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard to do it if you're just kind of talking about a subject, right? And so 5 years is actually pretty fast. And arguably, I've been a professional now. One could argue 3 years in, I was really a full-blown professional, could have been considered a professional speaker. It was because I engaged the audience in a very, very different way. Do you remember how we talked earlier about that experience I had in Chile? And when I realized it wasn't about what I said, it's about what the audience was able to discover, right?
Yeah, it was in a sense you were facilitating the
Yes.
conversation.
Yes. And so early on, I didn't stand on the stage.
Mm-hmm.
I stood with the people, and I had conversations with the people, and I taught in a form of questions and self-reflection, and it was a very different style. And to this day, it's a very different style because 95% of the feedback forms that come back to me from these events say things like, one of the best of the conference, best speaker I've ever seen, I feel so energized, stuff like that. And 5% say, I hate this speaker.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like how he invaded my space. He made me feel uncomfortable. And so early on, I let go of the 5%.
I felt like he was yelling at me.
Number one. I missed that one. That's the number one. I felt like he was yelling at me. Yes. But I let those folks go because I recognized that I had to really believe, I had to be me, and I had to focus on those that were a match. And it happens to be 90+%. So I wasn't going to let that small minority impact my ability to make a difference in the world.
Mm-hmm. At what point did you say, hey, you know what, I need to take this and merge it in with Impact, this marketing
So
company?
the sales line was interesting, right? So
Yeah.
the sales line continued to do its thing, but I recognized, you know what, I don't want to grow this into a huge agency because I don't want the pains of I want to continue to do my speaking, and so I'm not the guy to take it from here to here. I already did that with one company.
Mm-hmm.
And we were doing something that was unique because we were teaching companies how to do this stuff in-house. No other agencies, for the most part, were teaching people how to have a culture of video, how to have a culture of content marketing, how to train your content manager how to be great, how to train your videographer how to be great. So we were doing this stuff, and everybody said, man, that's a completely different business model. And it was complementary to a company that I really respected, which was Impact, right? Impact originally branded design, and Bob Ruffalo, Tom DeCipio were the co-owners there. And we decided to do an event together because we were referring business to them, they were referring business to us. We just saw that we matched. And so we did an event together called Impact Live last year. And it was a pretty big undertaking with a few hundred people. And, you learn a lot about a company, about an individual when you're put into stressful situations. If you want to feel stressed, put on an event. Right? Just feel it.
Uh-huh.
And it went off splendidly. And I could see that Bob and I could be a great match. And right after that, we started talking about it. And he said, what do we need to do? And I think I was ready. And so my team came on board, and we bolted that on to their service offerings. I became an owner at Impact. It was a pretty big deal. And what we really brought was two things to Impact. We brought the let's teach companies how to do this philosophy, and we brought the media side of things, video. They weren't doing any video, and video is changing the world. It's already changed the world. And for business, unless we show it, it doesn't exist in 2018 and beyond. Mm-hmm. And so we've all got to see ourselves as media companies, and we brought that philosophy mindset to Impact, and we're going to be a massive, massive media company, video trainers, all that, the whole nine. We're going to be doing all of that here forward.
And all the while, you'll be out speaking.
Yes.
And I always look for patterns.
Yep.
And here you go again. You just wrote about how to make $2 million, or you made $2 million, and it was a struggle for you to write this, but you felt compelled to do it over the last 2-3 years, how you did this through your speaking. And so where's this taking you? Are you getting...
So I started a third company, right? So I still own River Pools.
Yep.
And I still have influence there, and I oversee some big stuff. Like when I say big stuff, big picture stuff.
Mm-hmm. Sort of visionary.
I'm a visionary guy, but it's going great, and I'm still a 1/3 owner, as I've always been.
Mm-hmm.
And I love my business partners to death. And I have impact, and I spend more time with impact. It requires more time. But impact is I believe so much in the movement that is inbound, that is this philosophy that we're trying to carry to the world. And so that's happening. But then speaking is a part of who I am. And so I started a speaking company called Marcus Sheridan International. So what is a speaker's bureau? Well, a speaker's bureau is where event organizers come to you and they say, hey, I'm having this event. Do you have a speaker or speakers that would fit? But the reason why I started this was simple, Rob. It's because I see it now as fortunate enough. At first I was frustrated about it. Over the last roughly 6-ish years, almost 7 years of speaking, I've done over $2 million in speaking alone without a single bureau gig. And most people that become professionals, they need a bureau in order to sell them. And bureaus are not necessarily good or bad. They make your life potentially much easier as a speaker because you're not having to get all your gigs yourself. I kept going to bureaus and saying, I'm having a lot of success. Would you consider marketing me to your audience? And nobody seemed to care. For whatever reason, nobody wanted to represent me. And I'm like, this is amazing. Just to give you a sense for things, like this year alone, and I'm not saying this is never a brag. I'm trying to put context to the conversation. If a speaker is doing a couple $100,000 a year for a bureau is pretty dang happy. All right, that's a nice chunk they're making off. They're making 25%. This year I'll do, about $750,000 in speaking alone. Myself, from gigs, on stage. And bureaus, even earlier this year when I was contacting them, just I don't think you're a good fit for our audience, which I think is hilarious. Right? So I said, you know what, this is ridiculous. What am I doing? Why does it even matter? And I was telling this to some of my friends, and they're like, Marcus, you need to tell people how you did this without a bureau. And as I thought more about it, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start a bureau that's different. Because I kept having bureaus call me, and they would say, we have a gig that you might be a good fit for. And I'd say, okay, great. And I'd get excited about it, and then they'd call me back and they'd say, they went with somebody else. I'm like, but I never talked to the event. They never met me. How did they even know? So I said, you know what? Here's the problem. The problem is you just give out 5 names and you just say, go with it. That's a ridiculous model. I said, what we need to do is I need to get a set of speakers that I believe in and not offer a bunch of names every time, just a couple of names, and allow those speakers to pitch themselves, as well as my company, pitch themselves to these event organizers. And so that's exactly, I'm going to turn the speaker bureau industry on its head. And I'm going to allow speakers to do what they're supposed to do. And I'm going to allow events to better vet their speakers so that they can have greater experiences with the audience, and the audience gets more value. Because after all, the only thing that matters is the audience. It's the only thing that matters. So we got to find great fits. And so, yes, this is my third company. Obviously, I'm very excited about it because I believe in it. And that's usually how it works, right? You got to go, though, through, everything is the same pattern. Went through pain. It changed my life with River Pools, right? I went through the pain of not wanting to grow sales line, seeing that it was going to peak and it was going to be frustrating for me. So I'm like, boom, we have the Impact merger. I went through the pain of not being able to have, nobody cared about me as a bureau, and I kept getting rejected by them despite the numbers. So I said, you know what? here, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to fix this problem as well.
It's fantastic. I love it. What's it been like seeing Danielle off to school? And she's going far away from what I can tell.
She is going to Hawaii.
Yeah.
Specifically BYU Hawaii.
Yeah.
So the LDS Church has a branch in Hawaii.
Yeah.
She definitely isn't a Utah girl, for one, but she amazing. Went to her during her freshman year in high school, and I said, so I'm going to make you an offer. You can travel the world with me, and you can have all these experiences. But what it would mean is you have to leave your freshman year of high school when all your friends are going to be there. And you're not going to have experiences with them. And you're going to watch them on social media doing their thing, and you're not going to be a part of it. So I want you to think about it, but that's my offer to you. And she comes back to me and she says, Dad, I'm in. Dad, I'm in. And so we do it that year, and it's just unbelievable, right? I mean, it is amazing. You want to talk about inside jokes? Here's how you know you have a great relationship with a child or a loved one. How many inside jokes do you have with that individual? Because as a parent, if you have more than one kid, if you don't have inside jokes that the rest of the kids don't understand with that one child, then that means the relationship isn't quite there yet. That's how you gauge it. That's how you gauge it. At least that's what I've discovered. And so it was unbelievable. And when she got back, though, and I said, going with me around the world is going to screw you up for life. Because when you get back, you're not going to be able to get back on that conveyor belt that is public school and see it the same way. And of course, when she got back, she's like, Dad, everything is messed up. It's so inefficient, Dad. And the way that they're doing this, and they're not teaching this leadership model of education, and everything's just so rote. And I'm like, I know. And so she goes to school for a full year, and then 2 years. She finishes her 11th grade year up, and she basically says, you know what, Dad? I think I'm done. I said, I think you're done too. And she said, let's apply to college. And Hawaii made a lot of sense because it still has that travel element to it. It's far away. It's different. But here's what's interesting. Her grades weren't good enough to get in. Her SATs weren't good enough to get in. Because, fact is, I didn't care that she was prepared for her SATs. Nobody's ever asked me my SAT scores. Nobody cares about that. I just wanted her to be ready for life, right? And so she did not have the grades to get into BYU Hawaii. But this is what we did. As we traveled around the world, because she's traveled with me since then, right? As we've traveled, what we did is she would go with me to different locations, and we'd find major landmarks in the different countries or cities. And she would do a video segment that was basically her explaining to the university why she wanted to get in. And so she created this amazing video for the Board of Admissions as to basically, I want to come to BYU Hawaii because. And it's taken all over the world.
We talk a lot about what the future looks like, and it doesn't always have to be conventional, and paths aren't laid out for us. And so the gift that you're giving to your kids, Danielle, starting with Danielle, is to think in a different way.
That's right.
And you can get where you want to be without the conventional methods.
Why do we just accept it as the norm? You know what I'm saying?
I don't know.
It doesn't. I
don't know.
So let's look at it and say, well, is that really the right fit for me? Is that what I'm supposed to do? Yeah. Now, I can already tell you, my son's not going to go to college. Now, people look at that and say, oh, he knows it. I know it. Unlike his dad, he was completely gifted with his hands. He's a creator. He's a builder. No, he might be an electrician. I don't know what he's going to do. But it doesn't bother me that he's not going to college. It would bother me if he wasn't obsessed with his personal development and his education. Then I would be very, very concerned, right? And so, right now he's got a job with an electrician. He's 15 years old. How many kids have that?
Right.
Yeah, he's 15 years old,
and
he works with an electrician. And, by the time he's 16 or 17, he'll know more than most beginning electricians that are 23, 24 years old. He just will. He'll probably start his own business, I would guess, by the time he's in his early 20s. I don't know, but that's my guess.
Yeah.
That's my
What
guess.
about Larson and Pink?
So so we have Larson and we have Pink, right? Those are my youngest, and I don't know what they want to do yet.
Yeah.
And that's going to change. That's going to evolve. But I do
Are
know
you
this.
homeschooling them?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Danielle was the only one that went to public school,
Mm-hmm.
and that was her choice. And with my youngest, if they want to go to high school, they can go to high school. But the fact is, they probably won't, because they're also going to get the opportunity to travel with Dad. Like, my son's going to start traveling with me a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and my youngest daughters will do it too. And, and that's what's cool. It's the whole build it and they will come model, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you walk the path, you'll figure where it's trying to go. But if you're on the conveyor, there's only one place where it will go, and it's just and that's just why so many people are like, gee, I realized I was doing it, I didn't like what I was doing. Well, of course.
Yeah.
It's a byproduct of the way that we've set things up.
Yeah. Yeah. How'd you come up with the name Pink?
So her real name is Casey, but what happened is Larson, and you say, where'd you get the name Larson? Because the missionary that baptized me into the church, his last name is Larson.
Wow, cool.
And so that's how she got her name.
Mm-hmm.
And Pink, Larson was like 2 years old, and Pink was in her mom's belly. And like I said, Larson was 2 or 3, and she said, I think it would be great to call her Pink. I just love Pink. I'm like, you know what? I think that'd be cool too. And my wife looked at me like, are you serious right now? I'm like, yeah, why don't we call her Pink? And dude, she owns that name. Like, don't call her anything but. She signs pink. She tells everybody it's pink. She wears nothing but pink. I mean, you want to talk about somebody that owns, like, unless it's pink or lavender, she ain't playing.
Mm-hmm.
Completely owns it.
Mm-hmm.
So she wasn't one of those kids that rejected. It wasn't force feed on her. Man, she could change it whenever she wants, but I think she'll be Pink until she's 100 years old.
I love it. I love it. I love your ride. Your ability to connect these lessons and be so reflective, but even at a very early age, you were picking up on things. There's a great quote by Ray Dalio.
Principles.
From Principles. He says, pain plus reflection equals progress. And I think you epitomize that.
I like that. That's a great quote.
Yeah, it really is. And, a person somehow along the way, and I think it really came from your upbringing, from what I can tell, is this ability to simplify things.
Yeah.
It's magic to be able to do that. I mean, we overcomplicate the crap out of things.
Man, that's my greatest gift.
Yeah.
You know how many times somebody said to me, Marcus, I heard a talk on content marketing a month ago. You just explain it in a way that I've never heard, and I finally get it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's because I don't talk like a marketer. Man, I'm so grateful that I didn't go to college to be a marketer.
Yeah. Because
I obsess over the way a buyer thinks.
Yeah.
Not the way a marketer thinks. You know what I mean?
Naturally curious.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with marketing school, but there's a lot to be said that, too much advanced learning can thwart creativity if we allow it to.
Mm-hmm.
If we allow it to.
Yeah, I agree. And I can't wait. We're at the next Impact. This is the
Impact Live 2018.
2018.
It's a big deal.
And so
500 people.
Yeah, you guys have really grown it. Exciting to see it tomorrow for my
trying to create a movement, man. Trying to create a movement. I believe in this, and people will come if you really help them see the magic in themselves. And this is a conference that is about them, about the audience, about their business. And I think there's going to be a lot of breakthroughs. It's not about us. It's not about Impact. It's not about Inbound per se. It's about the attendees. And I think that's what's going to make it grow into something very, very special.
You're the master of ceremonies, is that?
Yeah. I'm
to
the
a certain
MC.
extent?
Yeah,
okay.
I'm the MC along with Bob, my partner at Impact. But I enjoy this. This is going to be so fun, and I love being in. I do MC a little bit, but this is the main place where I do it, and I just feel like I can finally just control the magic that's in the room, and that's so fun.
it's cool. I wanted to share a story with you. I've known Bob a long time, Bob Ruffalo, who started Impact many years ago, and he has his own version, of his story and where he's at today, which I just think is remarkable given, what he'd gone through and just how quickly he got his mind right and just really started killing it. But unrelated to this, I started reading your book earlier this year.
That's
I
funny.
was like, this is a great book. I love this book. And I got on the audio version, and I'm a runner, and I can't stand when I can't go outside. But this year I live in Detroit, and there was some pretty cold days, so I'd be on the treadmill. And the only way I can do the treadmill is with a book. And a lot of times the books aren't that great, so it still makes the treadmill kind of hard. But I really loved your book.
Thank you,
man. It was
man.
fantastic.
Makes me happy.
I'm a huge fan. Our marketing director also had the book after me and started to, self-implement, so to speak. And so I'm grateful to you for that and for putting yourself out there with the message. And who knew, when I saw that Bob, got together with you, I thought, well, that's weird. I was just reading his book.
Yeah.
And here we are. So I'm really grateful to you for taking the time this morning before this big event. And I know you probably got a lot on your mind before it. So I'm really grateful to you for spending some time with me this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you for taking the time to just, help just make it sounds cliche, but truly make this a better place, right? There's so much negativity out there. We need more Robs, right? That are doing this, that are keeping it positive, and that are finding where we connect, not where we are different or where we divide. I think it's really beautiful.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Marcus.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Love and gratitude to you.